y'all, and welcome back to There's Danger Here. I'm Leilani, and today I'm going to be talking with two amazing people, Rick and Melissa, a brother and sister duo whose lives were altered when Rick was incarcerated. Their lives and views were shifted in an instant. Rather than focus on the negatives in the broken justice system, Rick proposed a way to open the eyes of the masses. Through their program, Adopt an Inmate, anyone can become a pen pal with a prisoner. In this way, those who have never been exposed to the actuality of what jail and prison is like can learn from a first-hand account, working to humanize those reduced to state identification numbers. I am immensely impressed and grateful that Rick and Melissa were able to take the time to talk to me, and I hope everyone enjoys hearing about how a terrible situation led to something better for anyone who gets involved. Join me as these two give insights into the Texas judicial system, how difficult simple things were, and how they were treated throughout the process. So let's chat with them.
So I'd love to start with kind of how you guys ended up where you are now. Like what happened to spiral everything?
Rick, you want to?
I guess I got arrested in 2013, and I wasn't prepared for that, and so I think the first person I called besides my business partner was Missy, and yeah, we just started navigating the system then, trying to figure out, I naively thought I might get out in a couple of days, but I ended up in there for a year and 14 months, waiting, or no, a year and 10 months or something like that, waiting for a trial. And so then the whole experience was just eye-opening because, as a person who really didn't have a whole lot of contact with the police or justice, I always thought that the people that would be in there were just scum. I mean, when you're not in contact with it, you just figure it's working the way it's supposed to. And then what I saw was it didn't really matter if somebody was guilty or not. The system was exploiting everybody.
Certainly.
And so there ended up being, people I met in there that were good people. And that was shocking.
Yeah, I think that's a common misconception. But really, there's a lot of people that end up either arrested for a short period of time or there for a long period of time. And it's a larger number than a lot of people like to think it is.
Well, yeah, and you see that the prosecutors and the police really benefit greatly from being able to keep you in there for the longest period of time because they're just basically torturing you into complying. And all they really care about is a conviction.
Sure. So after your arrest, were you offered bail, or was that something you didn't get?
Well, my bail was something like 700,000.
It was 300,000. Yeah.
Well, after all was said and done, it was 700.
Okay.
But there was the real thing was, in the way that they would manipulate that, and they do that with a lot of people, is set the bail really high, and if you were able to pay the bail, then they'd arrest you on another charge.
Certainly.
And negate your bail, and you'd have to do it all over again.
Yeah. What state did this occur in?
Texas.
Texas. Okay. In the end, did you have a conviction, or were you
Yeah, I ended up taking a plea.
a plea?
The choice was 1,200 years or 8.
Okay.
So
did you do the full 8?
I did 6 or just shy of 6, and then parole for the rest of it.
Okay. And it was all in Texas?
No, I did an interstate compact because Missy had moved in with mom in Oregon. So it was really a surreal experience the day that I got let out for parole. I got driven to the airport and put on an airplane.
Okay. What are some of the differences between the state systems that you were in, did you find?
Well, I wasn't in prison in Oregon. I was just on parole.
Mm-hmm.
So I can only compare, I only know what Texas is like.
Okay. So what was that situation like for you?
Well, it was um, surprisingly better than jail.
Yeah.
Um, because you could walk around outside. In jail, there was just a concrete box for rec, which you couldn't see over the wall to see anything other than, although I got moved around a lot while I was in jail. And so I did get to be in a dorm where outside rec was just a chain link fence. And so you could see the world, but there was no windows in jail. You couldn't see outside when you were in your cell. So that was really the only time you could see any kind of scenery, a tree or a bird or whatever. And all of the food in in county jail was soy based. So by the time I ended up my sentence, I had the worst bursitis. Um, I couldn't even lift my arm up. And as soon as I got to prison and was able to eat actual meat,
Mhm.
that went away. It was like magic.
Yeah. I have not heard great things about the food, I don't think, anywhere.
Yeah.
Let
High
me,
carb diets, usually.
Well,
sorry,
even the food in what?
High
go
carb
ahead. When you're
diets.
done, I want to talk about it from the outside perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just I was just going to finish up and say prison food wasn't all that great, but it was 10 times better than jail food was. So, like I said, there, while the whole experience was, pretty traumatic and horrific, prison was better than jail.
Yeah.
That was a unexpected for all of us. So when the day he was arrested, I was living in California and I was on my girls' weekend trip in Sausalito, and I got a call from our dad. And it took a few hours. It was later that night. It felt like it was 2 weeks, but when I actually look at the facts, it was the same day that we were able to talk on the phone. But when you're thrown into this situation and don't have experience, I had no idea how to get in contact with him. And fortunately, I was with all my girls, and they all helped me figure it all out and get the phone account set up. And at that time, phone calls in Travis County were $27 for 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And all my girlfriends had a bunch of cash, for the weekend, and all their hands came out with $20 bills giving me money so I could put money on the phone. And so I'm skipping ahead, when he got moved to prison after the conviction, so there's like a 6-week intake period, and we were used to talking a couple times a day or more.
Mm-hmm.
But in Texas, when you first arrive at prison, there's a 6-week period where you can't make any phone calls. And so, of course, we were horrified and nervous and worried about what was happening with him. And we kind of felt the same way. Prison's got to be worse. And so we just were in the dark. The only thing we could do was handwrite letters. And I have all of his letters. I have a big box with all of his letters that he sent from jail and prison.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's I kind of feel like most of this is by design. I can't say which is or isn't, but I just don't see any reason why they can't use a phone for 6 weeks. Well, he was arrested in July of 2013 and he got moved. It was like
November or October. It was
Yeah.
November 14th or something like
Yeah.
that
Okay.
right. And
of 2014.
yes, right. And so when he left jail, they don't let you take your property. So he had all his property, which mostly amounted to letters from people.
Books.
What could you take? I think your address book and
I could take an address book and a Bible, and that was it.
So I had to go to Texas to get his property from the jail. And I was there visiting, and at that time in Travis County, there were no in-person visits. They were all video visits. So we flew out, or drove out actually, to Texas to move him out of his place. That was earlier. And so I traveled. I was there visiting again and to pick up his property. And I get to the jail, and this is how they treat you, like you're as bad as a criminal if you love someone who's a criminal.
Certainly.
And I will never forget that. I had a flight to come back home, and I missed it because they kept just fucking with me.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a woman who was at the counter, some officer, and she wouldn't even look at me.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see his property. I still have the bag. It was a paper bag, and it had his name and number written on it. And I could see it right behind her. And she would not hand it to me. She wouldn't look at me. She wouldn't talk to me. She told somebody else behind her, or it indicated to her with a head nod or something like, yeah, give this bitch this bag. And after a whole bunch of delay already, so I missed my flight that, caused a bunch of other delays. And I was at the airport like at midnight or something. And anyway, this is the kind of thing that you have no idea about before you have experience with it. Just how many ways that they obstruct you.
Certainly.
From contact, from participating in your own defense, and just the attitude that you get, just completely unnecessary. But at every angle, it's just, they claim that they want people to stay in touch and they encourage visiting and all that, but they don't. It's just false.
Sure. And so, kind of fast forwarding into the prison sentence, was there something specific that got you to kind of move to where you guys are today in regards to what you're doing, or was there just like an aha moment of I can give back, or I can teach the lay people?
I'm gonna start and then I'll let Rick go.
Okay.
again, just from the outside perspective. So like I said, we talked a lot. And when he was arrested, he was working for a company in Austin that writes software for nonprofits. So he knew a whole set of information, had a whole skill set that I didn't have. And so when we first started talking about it, he said, I will never forget this on the phone. He said to me, there's a lot of good people in here and a lot of sad stories, and I want to do something to help them. And so he started talking about this idea he had, which has evolved quite a bit. But, we just started like that and of course I was 100% on board. Yeah, that's awesome. And so he just started coaching me over the phone. Now build a website. Now get some volunteers. Now, and so I did it, all the things that he said, and we would talk a lot on the phone about what to do next. And so that's how it started. And for him, I think it evolved a little, like by the time he had said that to me on the phone, he had already been thinking about it. Clearly, we have a couple of blog posts about it, and his letter, I have a letter that he sent talking about his idea. So I'll hand it off to him.
Well, when I first came up with any kind of an idea, I thought I was getting out. That eventually it would come to trial time, and I would end up walking out, and I would end up staying in Austin, Texas, where I lived.
Mm-hmm.
And so after listening to so many stories about how people were arrested and how the police acted and things like this, and what they paid attorneys. So an attorney that picked up a case in Austin, the way they did it is they just picked random actual lawyers and would assign them to a case. Mm-hmm. They didn't have a public defender's office like you might find in California or some other states. So not paid regularly by the state. And these lawyers got $400 max if they went to trial. Mm-hmm. So you can see that it was rigged, because unless you had money, you couldn't get a lawyer that was going to want to take you to trial for $400.
Sure.
Right. And so then the other thing that caused was the lawyers that did work on cases would never have investigators that would go get, say, surveillance camera footage or any kind of evidence or anything like that. So they'd never work on the case on their side, and they'd always only have the evidence that the prosecution gave to them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the exculpatory evidence would be withheld, which is illegal, but they would do it. And if you read about Texas, you'll see that there was a famous case, Michael Morton, who had been convicted of murder, and they withheld the exculpatory, or it wasn't known whether it was exculpatory or not, but they withheld evidence that had DNA that ended up exonerating him.
Like 20-something years later.
Yeah, I mean, they found out that evidence existed after 12 years, and then the prosecution, a guy named Ken Anderson, and then people who followed him, fought to keep that evidence out for another 7 years. So anyway, that kind of activity is something that goes on. So my idea was, I wanted to put together a group of people on the outside who would be the investigators for these lawyers. and do it on a voluntary basis and say, okay, I'll go to this store where this robbery is supposed to have occurred and get the evidence. You just need to give me credentials so that I can be an investigator, blah, blah, blah. And then another problem that happens in Texas is that you have your wallet on you when you get arrested, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what they do is they put it, when they take all your property, they put that property in a special place called a value pack. They call it a value pack. That has any cash you had on you, and it has your wallet with whatever credit cards you have on you. Well, the only way that money, you could have money, but you can't use it to hire an attorney because nobody can get it to it until you get a power of attorney to somebody,
Mm-hmm.
where they can then use your money for your own benefit. And they automatically, here's the other thing, if they automatically put your cash on your books,
No.
which now the only thing you can spend that on is phone money and commissary. Isn't that convenient for the jail?
Yeah.
So anyway, I wanted to have people who would be bonded so that they could quickly become power of attorney and use their money however they wanted it to be used for. Go hire this attorney. This is my PIN number or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it was real grandiose, the idea. And then when it was clear I was going to prison, then all of this grandiose stuff was something that Missy wasn't going to be able to do unless she moved to Austin or something. And now I wasn't even on Austin. They were sending me to Huntsville for my first unit. And so we decided, well, let's take a page out of agile methodology, which is a sort of, it's a business term that started out applying to tech companies. And so the idea is that you do just whatever you can do in very small increments. So when you start an idea, you usually want to boil the ocean. You want to do everything that you can do and then release it that way. But Agile says, no, don't do that. If your website only has your name on it, then put that as a target and get that done, and then improve it in these increments going on. And if you do it that way, you can improve it by increments every day. You don't have to wait for some release cycle or a target date or anything. You just keep making improvements. So that's what we decided. And we said, what's the smallest thing that we can do that might have the biggest impact? And we decided that it was getting people on the outside to write letters to people on the inside. And that way, as these letters went back and forth, the people who were writing on the outside would get a real view into what is it like in there, and get there, and then the injustice would come out in these stories. And so you would have the people that were writing the letters would be one at a time converted to seeing how horrible this system is.
Sure.
And so then if we could get 10,000 people or 100,000, or, we'd start off, let's see if we can get 5 people to write people in prison. But eventually the goal would be, let's get people to write all 2.3 million people that are incarcerated in the United States. And that's a huge number, and that's a huge number of individuals that have their minds completely changed from what they thought the justice system was like. And that would have the biggest impact on society, instead of trying to do some sort of a campaign that reached out to 100,000 people or whatever. Just let's do it one at a time. This is the most sensible thing. So that's how it started. We just decided, let's take this one thing and see if we can get good at it.
We started doing, at first, we just started matching up people we knew, friends and family out here to write people.
Hmm.
And uh, as soon as we got the PO box and we got listed in some prisoner resource directories, the PO box just exploded. These are all applications from prisoners. And so then we had to, after we built the website, then we put a form on the site and started getting slowly a steady stream of people saying, hey, I want to adopt somebody. And then it just, by the end of the first year, I was using Google Sheets to track everything. And by the end of the first year, which really was like 6 months, we had 700 people in the database, prisoners.
Hmm.
And we had doubled that in the next year. And now we have well over 16,000 from all 50 states and a whole bunch that are still waiting to be entered. And so first we started just having people write letters, but then we started doing little favors for people because most families can't afford those phone calls.
Hmm.
But they have no way except writing letters. And so a lot of our calls, when Rick would call, would start off with him rattling off a few cell phone numbers. Hey, send this text this person and let them know, blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
And then there was a friend of Rick's, I forget his name, Rick, but the guy who wanted to, this was in jail still, and he wanted to send his wife flowers on their anniversary, but he wanted it to be as though he were out.
That was actually in prison.
Oh, it was? I thought it was still. Yeah, okay. Anyway,
Yeah.
so that was not an easy thing to do, but we did it. And, because like he wanted to write his name, he wanted to write the little note on the little card, you know.
Hmm.
There's no way for him to do that in there. And the finances, how to get it paid for and get it ordered and everything. And it took a few tries because if I sent him, I went to a florist, a grocery florist, and I picked up some of those cards and I mailed them to him. And of course, they rejected them.
Of
You
course.
can't send blank cards of any kind because then they don't have to buy them. They can
Yeah.
only buy greeting cards from commissary. And so I think what I had to do eventually was write something on one of them. And then he finished filling it out and sent it back to me. And, so the favors started getting a little bit more complex. And
Hmm.
I remember Rick saying that he woke up in the dorm once hearing somebody talk about adopt an inmate. And he was like, hey, that's my family's. That is not. So it started really with word of mouth on the inside in Texas. And then once he got moved to prison, then we had more contacts. And once all the people that we knew in jail got most of them eventually get transferred to prison. So our network started growing. And uh, then I finally realized, wait a minute, there's women in prison too. So then we started reaching out to women's prisons, and it wanted to happen. It's one of those things that we don't really have to do much to keep it going. It's just going.
That's great. Now that you're kind of, nationwide and you have all of this, do you anticipate like growing, or is this kind of your wheelhouse where, you want to do the adopt a inmate and have people writing and hearing stories, or is there a plan?
Yeah, it's definitely growing. Um, we just launched this new campaign that Martin was talking to you about, and we're hoping that that's going to put us on the map and get us a lot of attention and educate people.
Sure. Did you want to speak on that a little bit?
Yeah. Um, so there's a documentary that I watched years ago. I think it came out in late 1990s or early to late, yeah, 1998 or 99, something like that. And there's a middle school in Whitwell, Tennessee, very small town, smaller than the town I live in, which is 5,000 people. And they were doing a unit on the Holocaust.
Mhm.
And one of the students said, 6 million. Like, I don't even know how to comprehend 6 million. It's just too big of a number for me to fathom. And so they decided, well, let's collect 6 million of something. And they decided on paper clips because it was a symbol of resistance during the Holocaust, which I didn't know. So this documentary goes through their whole project and how they got started and how it grew. And to date, they have something like 50 million paper clips because people are still sending them. They have an exhibit at the school that has brought lots of recognition to the town. And one of their problems they had to figure out a solution for was where to house the paper clips. And there was a German couple in the town, and they managed to get an actual rail car that was used to transport Jews to concentration camps. And so they have that's the museum. And now they have a artifact exhibit. They were someone's personal collection of artifacts was donated to the school. And now they have a little museum there, and they even have video tours, which I have ours recorded, where she was going through and telling the whole story, how they got started and what they're doing now. And so it dawned on me that we should hijack that idea and collect 2 million of something. And so because drop a dime is a common phrase in prison that essentially means you're a snitch, you're providing some needed information. And so our idea is we're going to snitch on DOC, and we're calling it, the whole overarching campaign is called Drop a Dime on Injustice. We want to build the mobile cell, and eventually, this will be the final phase, eventually tour it around different regions and let people spend 10 minutes in the cell. And we're hoping to do the same thing that the Paperclips project did, which is have a space where the mobile cell can be when it's not touring, and what Rick is calling PIE, P-I-E, for prison immersive. Is that right for the I?
Interactive.
Interactive experience. So where people can actually get a fairly authentic experience of 10 minutes, in a cell. And then we have all kinds of other plans to fill out the whole experience. So if we collect 2 million dimes, that's $200,000, which is probably about what we're going to need for the build. There's a local reentry organization here that helps find employment for people who have released from Oregon prisons. And she does job fairs. So she's got a handful of local contacts of justice impacted people. And we're going to use that pool to volunteer with the bill. So every point we can, we want to, give them a seat at the table. And so in general, that's the plan. And I don't know if Rick wants to elaborate on that?
Well, it just works with our kind of overall philosophy, which is the reason the justice system hasn't been changed is because there's not a lot of people out there who really understand it and have had any experience with it. And the people who come to the realization that things are broken, the only way they come to that conclusion is to have contact with it. Probably if you talk to anybody in your circle that has changed their mind on justice and thinks that the system is broken, is because somebody that they knew or a loved one or themselves got thrown into the system.
Mm-hmm.
And so
a big
that's
part of
the
that,
whole thing about writing letters and this project here is to get people thrown into the system in a way, and to, even if it's a small amount, they can say, hey, this is how they house people,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah. So I don't think I ever touched on my history. I actually worked as a nurse at OSP, the state penitentiary, for a year.
Oh,
OSP has the smallest cells in the US because it's one of the oldest working prisons. It's not the oldest. But I know going in there, which is why I loved the concept of, having the mobile cell, because you could touch the wall and touch the bunk, and the toilet was at the head. And all the
yeah,
guys call it, they're like, yeah, this is my king size bathroom. This is where I live. And I still, after getting away from that system, I keep in touch with a lot of the guys, and we talk about stuff like that all the time. So I absolutely love the idea. I've already told a few of them about it here in Oregon, that's kind of what we're moving to. And they're like, good, people need to see what this is,
right.
especially, when they get settled in, they're like, this is where we live for
Yeah.
30 days.
Yeah, and in Texas, they have units like what you're talking about. And it's a two bunks in
Mhm.
the a cell that small, and your
Yeah.
head is right next to the toilet.
Yeah.
And so in the middle of the night, a guy has to use the toilet, and of course, I don't know if people have told you this, but for some reason in prison, hearing somebody pee is really a horrible thing. And
Yeah.
so what they have to do is, while they're peeing, so you don't hear it, they have to flush the toilet the whole time.
Hmm.
And so millions of gallons of water are just shoved down into the sewer system just so some guy doesn't have to hear the other guy pee. But what's crazy is they're industrial toilets, and it sounds like a jet
Hmm.
flying by. They're that loud, so you don't get any sleep because of that.
Hmm.
Anyway, yeah, I think I really want, as part of the experience, for people to pretend they're going to the bathroom
Yeah.
and see, what do you think about that? Like, how do you feel about going to the bathroom right here and there's a guy sleeping right there next to you? Uh, you know,
yeah,
take
all these things that you find out that you just never even thought about, or maybe you assumed that the things were better, but because there's such a stigma around it, people don't want to talk about it. So we're trying to
Hmm.
make, number one, we're trying to make it okay to care about someone who's locked up, about someone who may have committed a crime. That's okay.
Hmm.
Um, and also just educate people about, dispel some of the myths, um, because it just doesn't get talked about. So people remain hesitant.
Hasn't.
And like, I remember one of the things that really blew me away, and this was I don't remember what the schedule was in jail, but I know in Texas prisons, they typically serve breakfast like at 3:30 in the morning and lunch at 11:30, or no,
10
10,
o'clock.
10. and then dinner like at 3:30. So if you, and it's a coveted job. They have a program there where they translate textbooks into Braille. The last I knew, there were two subjects. One was math, and I forget what the other one was. But they're, these. It's not like it's not like children's books. You have to be certified by the Library of Congress to do the job. It brings in lots and lots of money to that system, and they don't get paid anything. They can't even buy coffee or shampoo. And so in Texas, you couldn't work at a job like that, or they still have people in the fields. They've got officers on horseback, and you can work hard a lot, and you still can't, even if you're doing something that benefits the system or the community, you have to have somebody on the outside put money on your books if you want to buy coffee. And if you're a grown man and you can't have anything to eat from 3:30 in the afternoon until 3:30 the next morning, you have to buy food to supplement. I don't know if have you ever seen that clip of Al Franken when he was a senator and he's asking somebody how big the cells are?
I haven't seen that.
Oh, it's crazy. It's hilarious. He's just asking this guy, I forget exactly what the hearing is about, something about prison. And he just asked some guy on the panel, how big is a cell anyway? And the guy just stammers, like he doesn't even know. And Al Franken keeps has this quizzical look on his face, and he finally looks behind him like, am I not asking this right? Because the guy, how big, it's, what do you mean? Like the size of a cell, square footage. How big is it? Well, and he can't answer. And finally he just kind of guesses. And he's like, okay, so that's like the size of a small closet. And this is the thing, like people who involved don't even know. People who are making the rules don't even know what's going on.
Yeah.
You mentioned you did some healthcare?
Yeah, I work in healthcare.
But in the prison?
Yep, I did. I worked for a year at the state penitentiary.
Did that kind of change your
Well, I tell everybody that I have a very unique worldview. My uncle did 15 years, starting when I was pretty young. So I had written to him since I was maybe first, second grade up until he got out. He ended up getting out when I was in high school. So I've always been in contact. It's never been kind of faux pas in my family. It's always been, oh, your uncle's in prison. This is what it's for. And I've had, most of my male cousins have at least visited jail for a night or two. It's never been big in our family. So it's always entertaining to hear other people and how they're like, oh my goodness, it's just, like my family would never. I'm like, oh, well, mine would, and it's fine. And so it worked out well for me when I worked in the prison because I just had a different view than a lot of the other nurses walking in. I was like, oh, my uncle did 15 years, and the difference between me and you is maybe when I was younger, I didn't get caught for some of the dumb things that I did. So I was like, it's just one single choice that maybe has changed something. So I've always been kind of in that realm, and I've never had issues, which has been great. Especially now that I talk to more and more inmates. My family is they're like, oh, this is cool. My kids get involved. They write little notes to the side to some of these guys. My daughter draws pictures to them. So we're kind of heavily involved, but I do see like the difference in the system. Jail being not great, especially here in this state. We used to have to treat guys for things like lice and scabies every time they came back from jail. Their jails are just dirty here. And so it was a little bit cleaner in the prison, which seems like an odd thing to say. But yeah, so I think I have a pretty unique view compared to a lot of other people, but I can appreciate the system and how people just don't understand it.
No, it's just, I mean, this is when I was getting out, when I was on the way out, which they kind of gave me diesel therapy and sent me to like 4 or 5 different units before I finally got home. Um, I shared a cell with a guy who was an SSI at the Polunsky unit and in the medical area.
Mhm.
And I thought that it was a little unique. He was telling me about a guy who was on death row who was diabetic, and they had to amputate his legs. And several times, like they keep working up from his ankles to his
Mhm.
thighs. And essentially, they were keeping him alive so that they could kill him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, he would tell me stories about this guy screaming in pain because they were cleaning his wounds so they could, you know, get him
Yeah.
patched up because, you know, you got an electric chair coming up soon.
Yeah. Which
And
seems
then
ridiculous.
and then I just saw a story within the past 2 weeks in Texas, same state, who's 80 years old in hospice with terminal cancer, and they still scheduled him to be executed.
Yeah.
And you know, thankfully for him, he died a couple of days before his scheduled execution, but they were willing to go through with it.
Hmm.
So,
It's a crazy waste of time. I don't know. Yeah, and I think for the gentleman that was diabetic, I bet you just from the medical side of things that's because prison, the food is not great. It's usually, like I said, high carb, which is very dangerous for diabetics. They have to have the protein in order to keep their blood sugar down. If you don't, what happens is if you get a wound, it won't heal. And so that's, pretty common. We call it, it's unregulated diabetes, but I'm sure that it's related to the diet and conditions that he was in, and not being able to work out plays a part in that too. So
yeah, and you
all
don't
of
have
that.
an option. The
Yeah.
commissary is worse than the food they feed you as far as
Hmm.
carbs and sugars.
Hmm.
And they don't care.
And you get no sunlight either, so anything that would mitigate
Yeah.
it is off limits.
Definitely. Definitely. So while we are chatting, do you guys want to shout out kind of either your website, where to contact you, how to donate, how to get involved?
Our website is adoptaninmate.org. We're across pretty much every social media platform
Yeah,
as
the
Adopt an
link.
Inmate.
We're personally on LinkedIn. We have a Twitter account. We even have a TikTok account, but we really haven't made any videos yet. But we're working on it.
We're
And
trying.
And remember, to all those out there listening, be careful. It's a dangerous world we live in.
that social media can be pretty heavy.
Yeah,
Is the form still on the Adopt an Inmate?
The
Okay.
adopter form is there. We also have a volunteer form for people who want to help behind the scenes.
Hmm. Do you have a place to donate for this mobile prison cell?
Yeah, there is a web page.
well, if you
It's
go to the homepage, there's a button on there that says "Drop a Dime,"
Okay.
and that's for
Perfect.
this particular program. There's other donation buttons on
very
there, but that
generic. Yeah.
generally, you know, for general donations and stuff. But "Drop a Dime" is the button that kind of explains what the program is about and what we're doing, and gives you a link to our plans for building this cell. And
That's wonderful. I appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to me today, kind of about everything.